Myoho Renge Kyo Nam Myoho Renge Kyo Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello, friends. Let's continue with the four debts of gratitude. And Nichiren was just talking about the nature of what those debts are. And he continues, moreover, as for the benefits that the Buddha had attained as a result of his practices, he divided them into three parts, of which he himself made use of only two. For this reason, although he was to have lived in this world until the age of 120, he passed away after 80 years, bequeathing the remaining 40 years of his lifespan to us. So, again, this is storytelling, right? So you can't take that literally. In fact, the source of that statement has not been traced. Presumably it is based on a passage in the Great Collection Sutra. But I think it's in the light of how we've learned to study Buddhism in total, and true to form with Nichiren, these aren't literal numbers. What he's in fact saying is that the influence of Buddhist teachings, of Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings, lasted a full generation or two, depending on how a generation was seen back then, after his passing. It was as though he was still there teaching. Or you could say that those 40 years were a transitional period whereby the bodhisattvas, the disciples, the students, became confident enough and in the spread of the teachings that they became the authority for spreading the teachings without the necessity of a human, one person standing in as Buddha to be the teacher. Because you have to remember, the goal of Siddhartha, before he became Shakyamuni Buddha, was always to create, not to create so much, but as to reveal a teaching that he would discover that was universal, that anyone could practice. Remember again, India still to this day is a very strong caste system. If your bloodline wasn't to be an intellectual, you were never to be an intellectual, nor your offspring, nor their offspring, ever. You were always going to be a downtrodden lower class. So it's a very revolutionary thing for Shakyamuni Buddha to come out and say, doesn't matter if you can't read or write. You have the Buddha nature in you, and you can enlighten yourself. You can awaken to it. You can reveal your enlightenment. What? Only Brahmins can do that. Only the upper intellectual class can do that. No. If a truth is truth, then it applies to everyone and everything. It's not just a certain privileged class that get to experience it. That's so revolutionary. Even today, people wrestle with this. Right? So, when you read this hyperbole about, he was supposed to have lived 120, how do you know he was supposed to have lived 120 years? That's not the point. The point is that his influence, as though he was still there teaching, lasted another 40 years after his death. At which point we're to assume that the transfer of authority for the teaching became more broad through bodhisattvas, through other bodhisattvas, through other teachers, right? Even if we should gather all the water of the four great oceans to whet inkstones, burn all the trees and plants to make ink sticks, collect the hairs of all the beasts for writing brushes, employ all the surfaces of the world in the 10 directions for paper, and with these set down expressions of gratitude, how could we possibly repay our debt to Buddha? I think that's self-explanatory. Concerning the debt owed to the law, Myoho Renge Kyo, the law is the teacher of all Buddhas. It is the teacher of all of us. It is the enabler for all of us, no matter what walk of life, no matter what caste, no matter what literacy, to reveal our Buddha nature. That's an amazing, amazing thing today, and certainly 2,600 years ago, and certainly in the 7th century, or 13th century, sorry. It is because of the law that the Buddhas are worthy of respect. Therefore, those who wish to repay their debt to the Buddha must first repay the debt they owe to the law, because the law is what we practice. The Buddha is what we attain. And if we want to respect the Buddha, we do so by revealing the Buddha. And how do we reveal the Buddha? Through the law. Myoho Renge Kyo. As for the debt owed to the Buddhist order, the Sangha, the community of Buddhists, both the treasure of the Buddha and the treasure of the law are invariably perpetuated by the order, you and I. This is what perpetuates the law, and therefore the ability to reveal our Buddha nature. To illustrate, without firewood, there can be no fire, and if there's no earth, trees and plants cannot grow. Likewise, even though Buddhism existed, without the members of the order who studied it and passed it on, it would never have been transmitted throughout the 2,000 years of the former and middle days into the latter day of the law. So this is what we're doing right now. We are studying it and passing it on. You hear me say this all the time. Buddhism is about study. Boom. Boom. Accordingly, the Great Collection Sutra states, suppose that, in the last of the 500-year periods, there should be someone who harasses unlearned monks without precepts by accusing them of some offense. You should know that this person is extinguishing the great torch of Buddhism. Therefore, the debt we owe to the order is difficult to recompense. So, with Nichiren especially, you have to learn to discern between correcting other monks and how does he say it here? Harass other monks. So and again, Buddhism is about intent, remember, and attitude. If you start to harass a Buddhist who you don't like the way they're practicing, you don't agree with them, and you just want to defame them in some way, and you harass them, then you're committing a grave offense against the Sangha, and in turn, because of your extinguishing, or you're harassing the Sangha, you're harassing the law, and you're harassing your own ability to reveal your Buddha nature. This is terrible. But if your intent is to correct, is to set straight, is to, in other words, enable a stronger practice to reveal the law and the Buddha nature, then your act is one that may be difficult to see as compassion, but truly is real Buddhist compassion to practice the law correctly, right? Now, yeah, there are gray areas. Your intent may be really good, but you may also be wrong. So this is where, as Buddhists, we have to really, really think on on this material. This is my motivation for doing everything that I do, is I'm really, really concerned that the correct transmission of the teachings occurs, that we aren't, that Buddhists, and I've seen it. I've had large groups of people that I was in charge of teaching, and many of them left because they just got mystified. They just got tired of the rhetorical devices. They couldn't see beyond them. And in their defense, the people who were teaching them couldn't see beyond them, so how could they possibly help them understand? To the degree that I'm able to do so, I'm trying my most earnestly to make these teachings accessible so that they're more easily understood for what they really are. That doesn't mean I'm perfect, but that's my endeavor. That's what I'm trying to do. And it takes, I credit my daily daimoku and study for my aha moments, and I want to share those with you. That's what I'm doing. So hopefully, as Nichiren describes here, and as I've read in so many other sutras, what I'm trying to do is correct the record. But more than correct the record, it's more that there's so much misinformation out there. I'm just trying to slog through it and trying to give you more accessible language so that you can go, I can use that, right? And for yourself, make your own language based on correct understanding, always the meaning, not the words, so that you can practice more profoundly and feel secure and confident in your practice, right? So, Nietzsche's trying to do the same thing. Not everybody understood that or agreed with that back then, and he talks about that a lot, right? Thus, it is imperative that one repay one's debt of gratitude to the three treasures. In ancient times, the three treasures you know now, right? The Buddha, or the Buddha mind, the Buddha state, which is what we all want to be constantly in relationship with, in that awareness. The law that gets us there, that uncovers it for anyone, no matter what your state in life, Myoho Renge Kyo, and the community of Buddhists. The whole reason you were able to find my videos, or Nichiren's teachings, right? Right or wrong, somehow, throughout all the people who practice, the teachings were accessible enough for you to find them. Now you have to make something of them, right? So those are the three treasures. In ancient times, there were sages such as the Boy Snow Mountains, Bodhisattva Ever Wailing, Bodhisattva Medicine King, and King Universal Brightness, all of whom offered their lives in order to make such repayment. The first offered his body as food to a demon. The second sold his own blood and marrow. The third burned his arms, and fourth was ready to part with his head. Okay, so now don't run out and give blood as thanks for the Buddha, the law, and the Sangha. Don't go taking off your own head or feeding animals. Or, for goodness sake, don't burn yourself. That's not what this means. This is an attitude. This is a mental position to be so grateful for the opportunity to awaken your Buddha mind that these things seem like they'd be not worth doing, but they would be easily done as a profound sense of repayment, not that you would do them. Ordinary people in this latter age, however, though receiving the benefits of the three treasures, completely neglect to repay them. How then can they attain the Buddha way? The contemplation on the mind ground, the Brahmanet, and other sutras state that those who study Buddhism and receive the precepts of perfect and immediate enlightenment must repay the four debts of gratitude without fail. I am but an ignorant, ordinary person made of flesh and blood. This is Nichiren talking. I have not rid myself of even a fraction of the three categories of illusion. Yet, on account of the Lotus Sutra, I have been reviled, slandered, attacked with swords and staves, and sent into exile. In light of these persecutions, I believe I may be likened to the great sages who burned their arms, crushed their marrow, or did not begrudge being beheaded. This is what I mean by immense joy. So he's making another point again about who he is, what he is. He's not the original Buddha. He is Nichiren, a man. And as a man who's behaving as a bodhisattva, because he's enabling others to understand the teaching properly, a lot of the countrymen and the forces of politic and what have you, call them demons if you want, but these are just natural occurrences. He's being reviled and exiled and persecuted, right? Because he's correcting people and they don't like being corrected. Isn't that, we see this every day, right? So, what he's saying is that all of that persecution and harassment and so forth is validation that he's doing his job correctly. So, that validation gives him immense joy. He doesn't like being persecuted, but like these others who would not actually burn their arms or behead themselves, so on, he sees this is the age of endurance, remember? He sees that endurance as validation, and therefore it makes him great, it gives him great joy. The second of the two important matters is that I feel intense grief. So, there we go. Being a human being, it's all about duality, right? And he's making an admission here, and I want to point out, is that Buddhism doesn't automatically make everything calm and okay. We're still human. And as human, in duality, we're going to experience peaks and valleys. Even though what we practice, as Nagarjuna points out, is the middle way, we do so mentally, we do so with our minds, but we're still human. We continue to live on this planet as human, so we're going to experience highs and lows. So as much joy as he gets from the validation of his practice, he also gains grief from it. The fourth volume of the Lotus Sutra states, quote, if there should be an evil person who, his mind destitute of goodness, should for the space of a kalpa appear in the presence of the Buddha and constantly curse and revile the Buddha, that person's offenses would still be rather light. But if there were a person who spoke only one evil word to curse or defame the lay persons or monks or nuns who read and recite the Lotus Sutra, then his offense would be very grave. Do you see the difference there that I pointed out earlier between harassment and this, what he's calling here, defamatory or correcting? When I read this and similar passages, my belief is aroused, sweat breaks out from my body, and tears fall from my eyes like rain. I grieve that by being born in this country, I have caused so many of its people to create the worst karma possible in a lifetime. Those who beat and struck Bodhisattva never disparaging, came to repent of it while they were alive. Yet, even so, their offenses were so difficult to expiate that they fell into the Avicii hell and remained there for 4,000 kalpas. But those who have done me harm have not yet repented of it, even in the slightest. So it grieves him that the people who are causing him harm are making such a terrible, terrible cause for their own enlightenment. right? Describing the karmic retribution that such people must receive, the Great Collection Sutra states, quote, the Buddha asked, if there should be a person who draws blood from the bodies of 1,000, 10,000, or 1,000,000 Buddhas, in your thinking, how is it? Will he have committed a grave offense or not? The great King Brahma replied, quote, if a person causes the body of even a single Buddha to bleed, he will have committed an offense so serious that he will fall into the hell of incessant suffering. His offense will be unfathomably grave, and he will have to remain in a great Avicii hell for so many kalpas that their number cannot be calculated even by means of counting sticks. Graver still is the offense of a person who would commit by causing the bodies of 10,000 or 1,000,000 Buddhas to bleed. No one could possibly explain in full either that person's offense or its karmic retribution. No one, that is, except the thus come one himself. And the Buddha responded, Great King Brahma, suppose there should be a person who, for my sake, takes the tonsure and wears a surplice. Even though he has not at any time received the precepts and therefore observes none, if someone harasses him, abuses him, or strikes him with a staff, then that persecutor's offense will be even graver than that of injuring 10,000 or 1,000,000 Buddhas. Do you understand? What he's saying there is that it's one thing to persecute people who are already enlightened, Buddhas. Because people who are already enlightened, fully existing in the Buddha way, you can't influence them. You can't hurt. You can try, but you're not going to hurt them because it's meaningless. The only person you're hurting is yourself. And that's terrible, right? But if you're not yet fully a realized Buddha, if you're trying your best to be a bodhisattva, going through what you might say are the stages of bodhisattva, that's what we're doing. We're studying, we're learning. Every day something clicks and we go, I understand this a little bit more. I got to keep studying, right? And somebody harasses or persecutes or harms you, you're a student of Buddha. You're not prepared yet. You're not aware and enlightened and awakened enough to be able to be unaffected by those things. The person who does that to you is creating a greater offense, not only of, obviously, of their capacity for Buddhahood and enlightenment, but they're getting in the way of yours. And so what the teaching is saying, what Nichiren is pointing out, and what Buddha did in his day, is point out that that is a far graver offense. Why? Why is that a graver offense? Because the person, you and I, who are studying and trying to achieve this awareness and this enlightenment, are the Sangha. We are the ones who perpetuate Buddhism. The Buddhas don't perpetuate Buddhism. Buddhas are already realized. But we, the bodhisattvas of the earth, diligently working to get there. And in working to get there, what do? We communicate Buddhism. We spread it. If you stop that, then you kill Buddhism itself. That's far more serious, right? So that's the message of the last part of this Gosho, which again is about the debts of gratitude we have. And sometimes understanding how valuable something is necessary as a human to be able to understand how much we should appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to close this Go Show, and the next one is going to take us a little while to go through. Very important one. The teaching capacity, time, and country. That's a meaty one, and it talks a lot about how Buddhism is taught in stages, and not only in stages, but in order to reach different cultures, different levels of understanding, different capacities to understand. Not all of us come to the same answers the same way. We all have our own perceptive filters and obstacles. Some of that is because of the society we grow up in. Some of it is because of popular beliefs that get in our way that we have to deconstruct in order to change our thinking, right? So this has a lot to do with the culture, the time, the capacity, and where Buddhism is being spread. And that's going to be a very important thing to understand in order to understand the teachings in full. And so prepare for that. That'll be exciting and fun. Again, I thank you so much for participating. Please have a wonderful day. And I care for you guys very, very much. Thank you. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo.